"You're not going to leave her alone," I shouted into my phone, my voice cracking with panic. My heart was racing so fast I could barely breathe. The hospital room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in as I heard my daughter Melody's terrified voice just moments earlier. "Mommy, Grandma, and Grandpa just drove away. I'm here alone," she had sobbed through the phone. "They said they're going to Uncle Peter's party and that I'm old enough to stay by myself. I'm scared." My name is Christina Harper, Tina to everyone who knows me. And I'm a 36-year-old widow trying my best to raise my 10-year-old daughter after losing my husband Michael to a car accident 3 years ago. Melody has struggled with anxiety since her father's death, sometimes waking up with nightmares, worried something might happen to me too. Now, my in-laws had confirmed her worst fears by abandoning her when she needed protection most. "Tina, you're overreacting," my father-in-law Gerald huffed through the phone. "She needs to toughen up. She's not a baby anymore. We'll be back in a few hours." "A few hours?" I nearly screamed. "She's 10. It's illegal to leave a child that age alone. Get back to my house immediately." "We're already halfway to Peter's," my mother-in-law Barbara chimed in. "It's his 60th birthday and the whole family will be there. Melody was invited too, but she didn't want to come. That's her choice." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Here I was, stuck in the hospital after an emergency gallbladder surgery, unable to leave, and they had abandoned my child, their only granddaughter, because a party was more important. "I'm calling my neighbor Janet right now to check on Melody," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "And when I get out of here tomorrow, you will never have unsupervised access to my daughter again." "You're being dramatic as usual, Tina," Barbara said dismissively. "Michael would have understood. You're the one who's making her soft." Using my late husband against me was the final straw. "This conversation is over. Stay away from my house." I hung up and immediately called Janet, who lived across the street. Thank God she answered right away and promised to go check on Melody immediately. As I hung up, trembling with anger and fear, I knew this was just the beginning. Something felt horribly wrong in my chest, not from the surgery, but from this deep betrayal by the people who were supposed to help protect what matters most to me. Michael's parents had always undercut my parenting, but this crossed an unforgivable line. Growing up without consistent guidance, I promised myself I'd be different with my own family. Michael and I met in college. He was studying engineering while I pursued a degree in education. We had Melody when I was 26, and we were blissfully happy building our lives together. But Barbara and Gerald never quite approved of me. They thought their son had married beneath him, and they made subtle comments about how I kept house or parented Melody. Michael always defended me, acting as the buffer between us. But after he died, that thin shield disappeared. The tension had been building for years. Every family gathering became a minefield of passive-aggressive comments and unsolicited advice. "She's too attached to you, Tina," Barbara would say while Melody clung to my leg. "Michael was never like that with me." "That's because we taught him independence early," Gerald would add. "You're making her weak." I tried to maintain a relationship between them and Melody despite these challenges. They were her only connection to her father, and I believed having grandparents in her life was important. So I swallowed my pride, nodded along to their critiques, and kept the peace for Melody's sake. 3 days ago, I woke up with excruciating abdominal pain. After rushing to the ER, doctors diagnosed me with acute cholecystitis. My gallbladder needed to come out immediately. Panicked about Melody, I called everyone I knew, but my closest friends were out of town, and Janet could only help part-time due to her work schedule. In desperation, I called Barbara and Gerald. They agreed to stay at our house for the 3 days I'd be hospitalized, seemingly happy to help. Relief washed over me as I went into surgery, believing Melody would be cared for. I even felt guilty for my years of keeping them at arm's length. "See, Tina. Family is what matters in a crisis," Barbara had said while packing an overnight bag for my hospital stay. "We may have our differences, but we're here when it counts." I believed her. I trusted them with the most precious person in my world. Yesterday, I had called to check in and everything seemed fine. Melody sounded a bit quiet, but I assumed it was just her missing me. There was no hint that today they would decide my daughter, their granddaughter, was an inconvenience they could abandon for a party. Now, as I waited for Janet to call back, I realized this wasn't just a one-time lapse in judgment. This was who they truly were, and I had been blind to the danger. Janet called back 10 minutes later. "I'm with Melody now," she reassured me. "She's upset, but okay. I've brought her to my house, and she's having cookies with my son. I can keep her until you're discharged tomorrow." Relief flooded through me. "Janet, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me," she said firmly. "What they did was child abandonment. Tina, you need to report this." I hesitated. They're her grandparents, Michael's parents. And they left a 10-year-old child alone in a house, for a party. Janet's voice hardened. "You had emergency surgery. What if there had been complications? What if you couldn't come home tomorrow?" She was right. The reality of what could have happened hit me like a physical blow. What if there had been a fire? What if Melody had been injured? What if someone had broken in? That evening, I made a difficult call to Child Protective Services from my hospital bed. The social worker's voice was kind but serious as she took down my statement. She explained this wasn't just a family disagreement, it was a clear case of child endangerment. "We'll need to investigate and document this incident," she explained. "Abandoning a child that age is considered neglect under state law." As I hung up, my phone immediately rang again. It was Gerald. "What the hell, Tina?" "We just got a call from some government agency saying they need to interview us about Melody. What did you tell them?" "The truth," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. "That you abandoned my daughter to go to a party while I was in the hospital. It was a family gathering, not some wild party, and she was perfectly safe." "She was terrified, Gerald. She's been having anxiety since her father, your son, died. And you left her alone." "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "We're her grandparents. We have rights." Something in me snapped. "Rights? You think leaving a child alone gives you rights? You have responsibilities, Gerald, which you completely abandoned, just like you abandoned Melody." "Barbara's crying because of what you've done," he said, trying to make me feel guilty. "After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done besides criticize and undermine me since Michael died?" My voice was shaking now, but with anger rather than fear. "Tell Barbara I'm sorry she's upset, but I'm more concerned about my traumatized daughter. I'll be home tomorrow, and I don't want either of you at my house." "You can't keep us from seeing Melody," he thundered. "Watch me," I replied, and hung up. That night, my hospital room felt cold and empty. I stared at the ceiling, second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd overreacted. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard Melody's frightened voice. "Mommy, I'm here alone." No, I hadn't overreacted. If anything, I had been too tolerant for too long. The hospital discharged me the next morning. Janet picked me up and filled me in on Melody's night as we drove home. "She had trouble sleeping," Janet said quietly. "Kept asking if you were really coming home today." My heart ached. "Did she say anything else about what happened?" Janet hesitated. "She mentioned this wasn't the first time they'd left her alone." I nearly choked. "What?" "Apparently, they went grocery shopping yesterday and left her home for about an hour. She didn't call you because they told her not to bother you while you were recovering." White-hot anger surged through me. They had abandoned her twice and manipulated her into keeping quiet about it? When we arrived at Janet's house, Melody flew into my arms, clinging to me like she used to after Michael died. "Mommy, you're back," she sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm here, sweetie," I whispered, fighting through the pain of my surgical incision to hold her tight. "I'm so sorry about what happened." Later that afternoon, after settling back into our home, I changed the codes on our electronic door locks. I was still moving slowly from surgery, but determination pushed me forward as I called a locksmith to change the physical locks as well. Melody watched me with wide eyes. "Are Grandma and Grandpa coming back?" she asked quietly. I sat beside her on the couch, choosing my words carefully. "Not for a while, honey. What they did was wrong and dangerous." "They said I was being a baby," Melody whispered. "Grandpa said Daddy wouldn't be proud of me being so scared." Fury rose in my throat. Using Michael against our daughter was unforgivable. "Your daddy would be incredibly proud of you," I said firmly. "You were brave to call me when you felt unsafe. That was exactly the right thing to do." By evening, my phone was buzzing constantly with texts and calls from Gerald, Barbara, and even Michael's brother Peter. I finally answered Peter's call. "Tina, you need to calm down," he started. "Mom and Dad are beside themselves. They're saying you reported them to child services and changed the locks?" "They abandoned my daughter, Peter, twice." My voice was ice. "They left a 10-year-old alone to attend your birthday party." "Look, they made a mistake." "A mistake?" I interrupted. "A mistake is forgetting to pick someone up from soccer practice. Deliberately leaving a child alone after being trusted with her care is a choice." "They're family, Tina. Melody's grandparents." "Being family doesn't give them the right to endanger my child," I replied. "Would you leave your kids alone at that age?" His silence was telling. "That's what I thought," I continued. "I've filed a formal report, and yes, I've changed the locks. They're not welcome in my home until they acknowledge what they did and take steps to earn back my trust." After hanging up, I found 3 voicemails from Barbara, each progressively more hostile. "Tina, this is absurd. Gerald and I have never done anything but love Melody." The first one began. The second, "You're turning our granddaughter against us. Michael would be horrified by your behavior." And the third, left just minutes ago. "We're consulting with a lawyer about grandparents' rights. You can't keep us from seeing Melody. You've gone too far this time." I deleted them all, hands shaking. I knew the threat about grandparents' rights might not be empty. They had the resources for legal action. But I also knew I had documentation of their neglect, and protecting Melody was worth whatever battle lay ahead. As I tucked Melody into bed that night, she looked up at me with teary eyes. "Am I in trouble with Grandma and Grandpa?" "No, sweetheart," I assured her. "They're the ones who made a bad choice, not you. You're safe now." But as I kissed her goodnight, I wondered if any of us were truly safe from what was coming next. The next morning, I received an email from CPS confirming they'd opened an investigation. The social worker, Ms. Patterson, would be interviewing all parties involved, starting with a home visit that afternoon. The email also included resources about child safety and family counseling. I was walking Melody to the bus stop when my phone rang again. Barbara's number. I declined the call, but a text followed immediately. "We're coming over at noon to talk. This has gone far enough." My hands trembled as I texted back. "Do not come to my house. I will call the police if you show up uninvited." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again before her response came through. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me," I wrote back. After seeing Melody safely onto the school bus, I called the non-emergency police line to report potential unwanted visitors. The officer was sympathetic, especially when I explained the CPS investigation, and promised to have a patrol car drive by around noon. At 11:55, true to their word, Gerald's SUV pulled into my driveway. I watched through the front window as they marched up to my door, Barbara's face set in determination, Gerald's in anger. When they found their key wouldn't work in the new lock, Barbara rang the doorbell repeatedly while Gerald pounded on the door. I didn't open it. Instead, I spoke through the video doorbell. "I told you not to come. Please leave my property." "This is ridiculous," Gerald shouted at the camera. "We have a right to see our granddaughter." "Your granddaughter is at school, and you have no right to be on my property after I've asked you to leave. The police have been notified." As if on cue, a patrol car pulled up. The officer approached calmly, speaking to Gerald and Barbara while I watched through the window. Gerald's face grew redder as he gestured wildly toward my house. Eventually, they got back in their SUV and left with one final glare toward my door. The officer knocked gently. "Ms. Harper, they're gone now. Would you like to make a formal statement about the situation?" I invited him in and explained everything: the abandonment, the CPS report, and their showing up despite my explicit request not to come. He took notes and assured me they wouldn't be back today, but suggested I might want to consider a temporary restraining order if the harassment continued. After he left, I sat on my couch, physically and emotionally drained. The site of my surgery throbbed, and I realized I hadn't taken my pain medication that morning amidst all the chaos. My phone rang again. This time it was Peter's wife, Jessica. "Tina, what's going on? Mom and Dad just called Peter in tears saying the police escorted them away from your house." I sighed. "They showed up uninvited after I explicitly told them not to come. The police simply asked them to leave." "Don't you think you're taking this too far?" Jessica asked. "They made a mistake, but—" "A mistake that endangered my child," I interrupted. "Would you have left your sons alone at 10 years old?" Jessica hesitated. "Well, no, but—" "Then please don't ask me to accept what you wouldn't tolerate for your own children." After hanging up, I logged onto Facebook to find my notifications exploding. Barbara had posted a long, self-pitying message about being kept from our precious granddaughter and falsely accused of neglect. She'd tagged several family members who were now commenting with confusion and concern. I felt physically ill reading her public distortion of events. But among the sympathetic comments for Barbara were a few questioning responses. "Wait, did you really leave Melody alone while Tina was in the hospital? That doesn't sound right. Weren't you at Peter's party that night? Was Melody there too?" The truth was starting to emerge, despite their attempts to control the narrative. A major plot twist was unfolding that I hadn't anticipated. The family was beginning to question their version of events. 3 days later, Ms. Patterson from CPS sat in my living room, finishing her interview with me while Melody was at school. "Based on our investigation so far, including our conversations with your in-laws, there's sufficient evidence to support your claim of child neglect," she said, reviewing her notes. "Your daughter has confirmed being left alone on 2 occasions, and your in-laws have admitted to leaving her, though they insist it wasn't for long, and that she was perfectly safe." "What happens now?" I asked, relief mingling with anxiety. "We'll complete our report next week. While this doesn't rise to the level of criminal charges, it will be on record should any future incidents occur." She paused, looking at me carefully. "Have you considered family counseling? It might help establish boundaries if you plan to allow them back into your lives eventually." "I'm not sure I do," I admitted. "Or at least, not in the same way." After she left, I checked my email to find a message from a lawyer I didn't recognize. The subject line made my blood run cold. "Representation for Gerald and Barbara Miller, grandparent visitation rights." My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was formally worded but clear. Gerald and Barbara had retained counsel to pursue legal visitation rights with Melody. It cited their close and meaningful relationship with their granddaughter and claimed I was alienating them without just cause. Without just cause? My surgical incision still hurt when I moved too quickly, a constant reminder of the moment my in-laws had chosen a party over my daughter's safety. I forwarded the email to my friend Elaine, who was an attorney, asking for her advice. She called me within minutes. "First, don't panic," she said. "Second, they're overplaying their hand. Grandparents' rights cases are notoriously difficult to win, especially with an active CPS finding of neglect. I'd be happy to represent you if it comes to that." "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking. "I just don't understand how they've twisted this around so completely. They're acting like they're the victims." "People who can't accept responsibility often flip the narrative," Elaine explained. "But the facts are on your side, Tina." That evening, as Melody and I were eating dinner, the doorbell rang. I checked the video feed to see Peter standing there alone, looking uncomfortable. I hesitated, then opened the door. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I let him in, keeping Melody in my sight in the dining room. I spoke with Jessica's sister, he began, sitting stiffly on the edge of my couch. She's a child psychologist. She said what Mom and Dad did was absolutely inappropriate and potentially traumatic for Melody. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't want to believe they would do something so irresponsible. I didn't either, I said softly. That's why I trusted them with her care. Peter looked genuinely troubled. I had no idea Melody was alone when they came to my party. They told everyone you'd arranged alternative care, and that's why she wasn't with them. This new revelation stunned me. They lied to the entire family? I'm afraid so. He looked toward Melody, who was watching us cautiously from the dining room. May I speak with her? I'd like to apologize for not checking on her myself. I nodded, and Peter spent a few minutes talking gently with Melody, who gradually relaxed as they spoke. Before leaving, he turned to me again. I've told Mom and Dad to drop the legal threats. Jessica and I won't support them if they continue this way. His expression was grave. Michael wouldn't have stood for this, and neither should we. As I closed the door behind him, I felt a surprising lightness. The family alliance I'd feared was fracturing, not because of my actions, but because the truth was finally emerging. That night, I received a text from Barbara. We need to talk, without lawyers. It seemed the next phase of this conflict was about to begin, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. 1 week later, I sat in my living room across from Gerald and Barbara. Elaine, my attorney friend, sat beside me, while their lawyer, a stern-looking man named Mr. Bradshaw, flanked them. Between us on the coffee table was a formal agreement that had taken days to negotiate. Barbara hadn't spoken directly to me since entering my home, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Gerald looked aged somehow, the confidence that had always characterized him notably diminished. Let's review the terms one final time, Elaine said professionally. The Millers acknowledge their lapse in judgment in leaving Melody unattended. They agree to complete 6 sessions of a grandparenting education program and 3 family therapy sessions before resuming unsupervised visits with Melody. Mr. Bradshaw nodded stiffly. And Ms. Harper agrees to dismiss the CPS complaint and permit supervised visitation in the interim, starting with 2 hours twice monthly at neutral locations. Those are the terms, I confirmed, looking directly at my in-laws. This isn't about punishment. It's about Melody's safety and ensuring nothing like this happens again. Gerald cleared his throat. We still think this has been blown out of proportion, but we'll sign. As they scrawled their signatures on the document, I felt no triumph or satisfaction, just relief that the battle was ending and hope that healing could begin. After they left, I found Melody sitting on her bed, clutching the photo of Michael that she kept on her nightstand. Are Grandma and Grandpa still mad at me? She asked in a small voice. I sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. They were never really mad at you, sweetheart. They're sad about the situation, but we're all going to work together to make things better. Will I see them again? Yes, I assured her. But things will be a little different for a while. We're setting up some new rules to make sure everyone feels safe and respected. 3 months later, I sat on a bench at the park, watching as Melody showed Gerald how to use the tablet she'd gotten for her birthday. Barbara sat nearby, actually listening as Melody explained a game she enjoyed. Peter and Jessica's sons played on the swings, occasionally calling for Melody to join them. The family therapy sessions had been difficult but necessary. Gerald and Barbara had initially been defensive, but the therapist skillfully guided us through conversations about boundaries, respect, and the trauma Michael's death had caused all of us. The grandparenting classes had made an even more profound impact. Barbara admitted during our last therapy session that they had been parenting Melody the way they'd raised their sons in the 1980s, expecting independence perhaps too early and emphasizing toughness over emotional support. We were wrong, she had said, the words clearly difficult for her. The world is different now. Children are different. And we need to be different too. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. There were still moments of tension, instances where old patterns threatened to emerge. But there was progress, real, meaningful progress that benefited Melody most of all. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "How's it going?" I smiled as I replied, "Better than expected." They're actually listening to her. Janet had become part of the extensive support network I'd built around Melody. I'd learned my lesson about relying too heavily on any single source of support. Now, in addition to Gerald and Barbara, Melody had Janet, Peter, and Jessica, my friend Elaine, and several other trusted adults in her life. As I watched my daughter laugh at something Gerald said, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Not the vindictive satisfaction I might once have imagined, but something more valuable. The peace of knowing I had protected my daughter while still preserving her connection to her father's family. This was what real victory looked like, not destroying relationships, but transforming them into something healthier for everyone involved.